You weren't even tall enough to see over the counter, but the moment that ball touched your fingers, something clicked. Not fireworks, not divine destiny, but rhythm. The bounce made sense when nothing else in your young world did. It wasn't that you chose basketball because it looked glamorous on TV. It chose you. In the silence of the driveway, with a dusty hoop nailed to a crooked garage, you found an altar. The ball returned to your hand like a secret handshake, a promise only you could hear. Other kids chased fun, distractions, noise. You chased the feeling of control, the silence between dribbles, the ritual of repetition. Very early, you learned that height was currency, and you were broke. Every playground game was a reminder. Taller kids soared, dunking and rattling the rim, while you survived on double-pumped layups. Coaches called you scrappy. Teammates said you were reliable. You hated both labels. You didn't want pity or mild applause. You wanted to be feared. But fear wasn't in your physical deck of cards. So you carved out a different path, one built on angles, anticipation, and foresight. You became the player who saw the screen before it was set, who called out the rotation before anyone else noticed. You weren't the strongest or the fastest, but you became the one who made it all work. The ball was your mirror. It showed you who you were when nothing else did. While others chased mixtape dunks, you whispered plays to yourself under your breath like spells. You counted dribbles, tracked misses, rehearsed floaters until your legs gave out. You didn't know what recruiting stars or rankings meant. You only knew that control was earned in empty gyms. The grind wasn't punishment. It was peace. Your undersized frame didn't matter when the ball was in rhythm, when you were building something invisible yet undeniable. Over time, people started noticing, but not with applause. Instead, it was subtle nods. Coaches calling you coach on the floor, older kids asking for advice. These tiny acknowledgments fed you more than cheers ever could. You weren't addicted to the spotlight. You were addicted to order, to being the calm in chaos. And yet, in the back of your mind, a whisper grew louder. Is it enough? Because in this game, being steady is both a blessing and a curse. You make the system work, but the system forgets you exist. Middle school blurred into high school. Tryouts became political battlefields. Depth charts turned into social hierarchies. The 6'3" kid with raw bounce and no discipline got 20 shots a game. You got 6, but you hit 4 every time. And when the game spiraled into chaos, it was your voice they listened to, even if they never said it out loud. You saw the floor like a chessboard, predicting breakdowns before they came, patching mistakes before they collapsed into disaster. But nobody claps for the fix. Nobody cheers for the patch that holds the ship together. You absorbed that reality in silence. Every turnover stuck to your chest like a brick, even if it wasn't your fault. Coaches didn't yell at the shooter for the wild 3. They yelled at you for letting him get the ball. That was the role: invisible architect, scapegoat when it broke, glue when it held. And you bore it because every night, when you laced up and the ball echoed back at you like a promise, you remembered why you started. Not for banners or cameras, but for that quiet second of stillness when the ball was yours and everything made sense again. There was one tournament, the lights a little brighter, local news in the stands. You didn't fill the box score with points. You filled it with precision. 14 assists in a game nobody filmed. Surgical passes that cut defenses apart. Tempo controlled like a symphony. When it ended, reporters swarmed the kid who dropped 28 points. He smiled, gave you a nod, and said, "He made it easy for me." You smiled back, but it stung, because you didn't make it easy. You made it possible. That was your curse, your gift, being the force that made others shine, even as you disappeared. You told yourself it would pay off eventually. If you just kept grinding, kept trusting the bounce, the world would notice. But the truth is, it wouldn't. Not really. And you didn't know that yet. All you knew was the bounce still listened, still gave you peace. And so you stayed, through soreness, through politics, through being overlooked, because somewhere deep inside you believed control was enough. You thought this was the payoff, the scholarship, the jersey, the crowd roaring your school's fight song. You thought college ball would be the dream, but it wasn't. It was a machine. And the moment you stepped on campus, it started chewing. Suddenly, you weren't special. Everyone here had been the guy back home. Every teammate had highlight tapes, newspaper clippings, banners on their high school wall. The scoreboard reset, and so did the politics. You were back to square one, fighting for minutes, fighting for relevance. The gym felt larger, but you felt smaller. The pace was faster, harsher, unforgiving. Every second mattered, and the margin for error shrank to nothing. You tried to lead, as always, tried to be the floor general, but your voice struggled to cut through the noise. The freshman guard ignored your call. The big man rolled too early. The chemistry faltered, and you patched it like always, holding the seams together with invisible thread. But no one clapped. Coaches still pulled you aside after practice with lines like, "Trust your instincts," and "We need your leadership." You knew the translation. You weren't scoring enough, weren't flashy enough, weren't marketable enough, so you stayed late again. Ice on the knees, film on repeat, floaters until midnight. You knew your role, make everyone else better. But the role grew lonelier by the week. Minutes shrank, the rotation shifted. The bouncier freshman with shaky handles but a killer crossover started stealing your floor time. You recognized the quiet, systematic phasing out, respectfully, silently, but unmistakably. You felt it in your body, too. The court didn't love you like it once did. The bounce was there, but recovery lagged. The ankle tweak from last season never truly healed, but you taped it up anyway. You always said, "I'm good, coach," because the moment you admitted otherwise, someone else took your spot. That was the unspoken law of the system. It didn't care how smart you were, how many plays you memorized, how many egos you kept in line. It cared about highlights, about rankings, about Instagram clips with fire emojis. You weren't that. You were the stabilizer, the unseen gear. There were moments that cut deep. You'd walk into practice, and the kid who was replacing you would greet you with respect, even gratitude. He'd call you OG in the locker room. He meant it kindly, but every time he checked in for you, it was a reminder you weren't the future anymore. You were the blueprint. You'd become the player others modeled, but not the one they built around. That realization stung in a way box scores could never show. The truth settled in. The system wasn't built to celebrate control. It celebrated chaos that looked like brilliance, mistakes disguised as highlights. A flashy turnover could trend online. A flawless floor game went unnoticed. History has always crowned conquerors, not the architects who built their armies. You began to realize you were the architect, valued in theory, forgotten in memory. The loneliness grew sharper. You were still first in the gym and last out. Still the calm in the storm, still whispering matchups during timeouts, still mentoring the wide-eyed rookies. You became glue again, but this time it wasn't out of ambition. It was inertia, loyalty, maybe stubbornness, because no matter how cruel the machine, the bounce still listened, still gave you peace when nothing else did. But the minutes kept slipping, and the silence after practice grew louder. You had once been the engine. Now you were the background hum, still essential, still holding it together, but fading into the shadows of the game's relentless forward march. Your body told the truth long before anyone else did. The tape jobs on your ankles grew thicker. The ice baths stretched longer. What once was a warm-up became a full pre-game ritual just to survive practice. The pain never really left anymore. It just shifted, from knees to hips, from joints to muscles, an endless carousel of soreness. You used to bounce back. Now you just bounced less. And yet you kept showing up. You stayed in drills, stayed in film rooms, stayed in the huddles. You still corrected mistakes before the coach noticed, still stabilized the floor when chaos threatened to swallow the team. But slowly, invisibly, you became less a player and more a teacher. You weren't competing as much as you were guiding. You were the veteran presence, the voice in a freshman's ear, the pair of eyes on the sideline, seeing what the others couldn't. You were still the glue, but now it was glue applied from the bench. No one told you it was ending. There was no ceremony, no speech, just fewer minutes, fewer touches, fewer mentions. The game didn't slam the door. It simply stopped calling your name. And that was almost worse, because the game still burned in you. You still saw it clearer than ever, rotations like chess moves, defenses shifting like storms you'd long since learned to read. But knowledge doesn't trend online. IQ doesn't sell tickets. The crowd roared for dunks, not the invisible architecture that made those dunks possible. You thought maybe there'd be a parade, or at least a thank you, but there wasn't. After one game, you peeled off your jersey, tape clinging to your skin, and sat in silence. No cameras, no scouts, just the sound of water dripping from the cold tub and the ache in your chest that no ice could soothe. You realized it then. The machine had already moved on. You were still running the offense, but they were already investing in someone else. It should have felt bitter, but it didn't, not completely, because beneath the sting of invisibility, you remembered why you started. The bounce still echoed in your mind, the way it had when you were too small to see over the counter. That rhythm, that silence between dribbles, that fleeting control when the world obeyed the ball's command, that was still yours. That was never theirs to give or take away. One day, you walked out of the gym for the last time. Bag slung over your shoulder, ankles taped, knees aching, no scouts waiting in the parking lot. No one stopped you, no one cheered, and somehow that silence felt earned. You didn't get the headlines, the draft call, the arena chanting your name. You got something quieter, something harder. The knowledge that you had given everything, bent your life around the game, and though the system never loved you back, the bounce always listened. History will not remember you. Teammates will move on. Highlight reels will fade. Your name will be forgotten in box scores. But the game, it remembers. Every pass that split a defense, every rotation that saved a possession, every late-night floater whispered into the rafters. Those moments were never for clout. They were for you. And so when one day someone asks what it was like, you won't lie. You won't dress it up with nostalgia. You'll tell the truth, that you sacrificed your body, your time, your peace, that you held teams together only to be forgotten by them, that you learned the sharp difference between being respected and being remembered. And that is why, in the end, it sucks to be a college basketball player.